Welcome back to Random History. I'm your navigator as we explore the little-known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. The events I delve into are probably not ones you learned about in school. These are the ones that when you do hear about them, you're likely to think that could not possibly be real. But they are. One of these subscription networks has a mini-series on the missions of the B-17 bombers flown in World War II. The B-17, or Flying Fortress, was a formidable aircraft. A typical B-17 Flying Fortress carried a crew of 10. Each crew member was vital to operate the aircraft effectively during bombing missions and defending against enemy fighters. The typical crew in a B-17 consisted of two pilots, the pilot and co-pilot. They were responsible for actually flying the aircraft. The navigator, who was responsible for keeping the plane on track and on time. The bombardier, who controlled the release of the bombs and operated the bomb site. He hung out mainly in the nose of the aircraft. The flight engineer, who also doubled as the top turret gunner, monitored the engines and mechanical systems, and then used the top turret gun when defense required it. The radio operator handled communications with other aircraft and ground control. The ball turret gunner operated the ball turret, which was located underneath the airplane, and that was used to defend the airplane from attacks coming from below. The tail gunner manned the machine guns at the rear of the aircraft to defend from rear attacks, which was typically the preferred location for German attacks on the B-17. Then a left and right waist gunner who operated the machine guns on each side of the aircraft to, again, add to the defense of the plane. Each crew member had specific roles in both offensive and defensive operations, contributing to the effectiveness and survivability of the B-17 in combat. Each plane lost meant at least 10 men dead or captured. During the course of the war, 4,700 B-17s were lost in combat. That means approximately 47,000 crew members had to be replaced to continue the fight. The Fortress was a durable aircraft. It could take an absolute beating and continue to fly. In this episode, we will hear about just how durable these planes could be. In general, navigators do not get much love or respect in the military. When I was in the Air Force, the government was paying large monetary bonuses to pilots to keep them from getting out and going to fly with the airlines. Navigators were part of the NBA, the non-bonus aviators. We did not get bonuses. In fact, many of us got riffed or reduced in force in 1992. So for today's hero segment, we will recognize a navigator who was commended for his actions. Our hero today is Second Lieutenant Joseph Sarnosky, a navigator on a B-17 called Old 666. His actions helped save the plane and the rest of her crew while on a reconnaissance mission in the Pacific. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Sarnosky died of his wounds he sustained in defending that aircraft. Today's main episode is about a B-17 Flying Fortress, World War II bomber that miraculously landed itself without a crew. This has become one of the most intriguing and debated events in the history of aviation. This eerie incident occurred during a period when air combat missions over Europe were grueling and losses were incredibly high. The B-17, known for its ruggedness and its ability to withstand extensive damage, earned a reputation as one of the most reliable bombers of the war. However, the tale of the ghost bomber stands out as one of the most unusual circumstances in which the aircraft actually landed itself without a soul on board. The B-17 Flying Fortress was a 4-engine heavy bomber developed by the Boeing company in the 1930s. It became a crucial asset to the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, primarily in the European theater, although there were some in the Pacific as well. The B-17 earned its nickname Flying Fortress because of its extensive defensive armament, which made it difficult for enemy fighters to attack safely. With its capacity to carry heavy bomb loads over long distances, the B-17 was integral to the Allied strategy of daylight precision bombing, targeting German industrial and military installations. The aircraft was designed to be durable and could continue flying even after sustaining significant damage, a characteristic that likely contributed to the events surrounding the Ghost Bomber. On 23 November 1944, the B-17 in question was part of a bombing raid over Nazi-occupied territory in Europe. The plane was returning from a mission targeting German oil refineries, a critical aspect of the Allies' strategy to cripple the Nazi war machine. This particular bomber belonged to the 91st Bomb Group, an experienced unit that had flown countless missions in the European theater. As the mission progressed and the bomber formation returned to England, something bizarre happened to one of the aircraft. At RAF Faldingworth in Lincolnshire, ground personnel noticed a lone B-17 bomber approaching the airfield. The aircraft appeared to be in distress, flying lower than usual and swaying slightly. As the B-17 neared the runway, it seemed as though the crew was attempting to land. However, upon closer inspection, it became apparent that something was very wrong. The bomber was flying without anyone visibly controlling it. No radio communication came from the plane. No signals were received from its crew. Despite these oddities, the B-17 miraculously touched down on the airstrip. The landing, although rough, was successful enough that the aircraft came to a stop without sustaining serious damage. Ground personnel quickly approached the aircraft, expecting to find injured or unconscious crew members inside. Instead, they were greeted with an eerie silence. Upon entering the plane, the rescue team found that the B-17 was completely empty. Not a single crew member was on board. The discovery of the unmanned, fully operational B-17 raised many questions and led to a range of theories about what had happened. How could such a large bomber fly and land without a crew? Why had the crew abandoned the plane? Where were they? One of the prevailing theories is that the B-17 had sustained severe damage during its bombing run. It is believed that the crew bailed out over the North Sea or another nearby location after determining that the aircraft was no longer safe to fly. What makes this explanation more plausible is the known fact that many bomber crews would abandon their aircraft if it had sustained critical damage, hoping to parachute to safety and be rescued. However, what remains inexplicable is how the plane continued to fly on its own, navigate, and land relatively safely. Another possible explanation lies in the advanced autopilot technology that B-17 bombers were equipped with during the war. The Sperry autopilot was a state-of-the-art system for its time, allowing pilots to maintain level flight and control the plane's attitude and altitude with minimal manual input. It is conceivable that after the crew had bailed out, the autopilot continued to function, keeping the aircraft stable enough to return to England. Additionally, the fact that the plane landed suggested that it had descended gradually after running out of fuel, ultimately making somewhat a controlled crash landing. There are also suggestions that the bomber's structure, particularly its ability to stay airborne even when heavily damaged, contributed to the event. B-17s were known for their resilience, often returning to base with missing engines, large holes in the fuselage, or damaged control surfaces. In fact, there was even one airplane that a German fighter literally crashed into, nearly severing the tail, that made it back to its home base safely. This durability may have played a role in keeping the plane aloft long enough for it to reach the English coast. The Ghost Bomber incident remains an unsolved mystery in the annals of World War II aviation. The crew of the B-17 was eventually located, having parachuted out of the aircraft earlier in the mission. They reported that their plane had been heavily damaged by anti-aircraft fire during the bombing raid, forcing them to bail out. However, None of them could explain how the aircraft had continued to fly and land without them on board. For aviation historians, the story of the unmanned B-17 has become a symbol of the incredible durability of the Flying Fortress. The aircraft's ability to stay in the air, even in extreme circumstances, speaks to the ingenuity of its design and the bravery of the men who flew it. While the specifics of the event remain clouded in mystery, it has captured the imagination of both war veterans and aviation enthusiasts alike. Over time, the Ghost Bomber has been recounted in numerous books, documentaries, and articles, with each offering slightly different details and interpretations. What remains constant is the eerie nature of the event. A massive, empty warplane making its way back to base as if guided by some invisible hand. While the story of the B-17 that landed itself is one of the most dramatic instances of unmanned aircraft, it is not entirely unique in the history of World War II. There were several other incidents where aircraft returned to base without their crews, although few did so in such mysterious circumstances. Bomber missions during the war were fraught with danger, and it was not uncommon for damaged planes to be abandoned by their crews. In some cases, the aircraft would continue flying on their own for short distances before crashing. One of the more famous examples occurred with a B-24 Liberator bomber in 1943. After a bombing run over Germany, the aircraft was abandoned by its crew after it sustained heavy damage. However, the plane continued to fly for several hundred miles before crashing into the sea. Incidents like these demonstrate the complexity and unpredictability of aerial warfare, where the line between life and death is often razor thin. The story of the Ghost Bomber continues to fascinate historians and aviation enthusiasts alike. While many of the details about the event remain unclear, the incident serves as a testament to the extraordinary resilience of the B-17 Flying Fortress and the courage of the men who flew them. Whether guided by autopilot or by some quirk of fate, the bomber's safe return to base without a crew is a reminder of the strange and often inexplicable nature of wartime aviation. In the broader context of World War II, the Ghost Bomber incident is a small but significant piece of the larger narrative of Allied air operations over Europe. It underscores the inherent risks faced by bomber crews and the technological advances that made it possible for them to carry out their missions. As one of the most iconic aircraft of the war, the B-17's legendary status is only enhanced by stories like this one, where its toughness and tenacity seem almost supernatural. As I noted in the lead-in today, navigators are the Rodney Dangerfield of aviation. We get no respect. We flew the same missions on board the same aircraft, yet we are not the ones at the controls. I sometimes joke with one of my sons and one of my older brothers, both are or were Air Force pilots, that they could train monkeys to fly. My son always reminds me, "You were replaced by an electronic box." The art of navigation has been lost. Calculating your position using a compass and a watch and the stars truly was an art form. Now it's all done with hackable computers and satellites. Our true hero today demonstrates how essential navigators were, and frankly still are, to military aviation. Second Lieutenant Joseph Sarnosky was a navigator aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress in the Pacific Theater during World War II, whose exceptional bravery in combat earned him the United States' highest military honor, the Medal of Honor. Born in Simpson, Pennsylvania on 31 January 1915, Sarnosky grew up with a deep sense of duty and patriotism. His actions on 16 June 1943 during a reconnaissance mission over the Solomon Islands would forever immortalize him as one of the great heroes of World War II. Sarnosky was assigned to the 43rd Bombardment Group, 65th Bomb Squadron in the 5th Air Force, under the command of Major General George Kenyon. By mid-1943, Sarnosky had already proven his abilities in numerous combat missions, but the mission that would define his legacy took place when his B-17, known as Old 666, embarked on a dangerous solo reconnaissance flight. The mission's objective was to photograph Japanese installations on Buka Island in the Solomon Islands, an area heavily fortified and defended by Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft installations. During the mission, Old 666, piloted by J. Zemer, was intercepted by several Japanese fighters. The B-17 had already taken considerable damage from ground fire when a squadron of approximately 20 enemy fighters began their attack. As the navigator, Sarnosky's role was vital to ensuring the success of the reconnaissance mission by guiding the bomber to its target. However, with the aircraft under heavy fire, Sarnosky did not hesitate to take on an additional, more dangerous responsibility. As fighters swarmed the bomber, Sarnosky left his navigator station and manned one of the forward machine guns. Despite having no formal training as a gunner, he fought off repeated attacks with exceptional determination, successfully shooting down at least 2 enemy planes. During the intense engagement, he sustained serious wounds from shrapnel and gunfire, but he refused to abandon his post. Even after he being gravely injured, Sarnosky continued to fire at the enemy until the attackers were finally driven away. Although mortally wounded, Sarnosky's courageous efforts helped protect the crew of Old 666 and allowed the bomber to successfully complete its mission. His valor ensured the aircraft could return to base with critical reconnaissance photographs, providing valuable intelligence for future Allied operations in the Pacific. Tragically, Sarnosky succumbed to his wounds shortly after the Japanese fighters disengaged, dying in the plane he had fought so fiercely to defend. For his extraordinary heroism in combat, Second Lieutenant Joseph Sarnosky was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor on 17 December 1943. His citation reads in part, "Though mortally wounded early in the action, Sarnosky refused to leave his gun and with superhuman effort and grim determination fought on until the attackers were driven off. He died at his post of duty." Sarnosky's selflessness and bravery serve as a powerful example to the highest ideals of service, sacrifice, and duty. His actions not only saved his crew, but also contributed to the larger Allied war effort in the Pacific. Sarnosky's legacy continues to inspire generations of airmen and soldiers. Today, his memory is honored with various tributes, including the Sarnosky Medal of Honor Memorial in his hometown of Simpson, Pennsylvania. His incredible courage and sacrifice during one of the war's most dangerous missions reminds us of the personal bravery displayed by so many during World War II. As I have said in several of my previous episodes, these are the world's true heroes. The men and women who are willing to sacrifice everything for the protection of our way of life, for the protection of their comrades. Anyway, this brings us to the end of another episode. As always, I hope you enjoy listening and really hope you come back and listen to future episodes. If you'd like to view the transcript or sources for this episode, click on the link in the description. You can also make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link or by shooting us an email. Until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.